you ever attended college or are currently in college, there's a pretty good chance that you have been asked to write an analytic paper. Yes, I'm talking about this piece of writing. You know, the one that's composed of an intro, body, and conclusion. Now, this may surprise you, but while it is true that the analytic paper is a peculiar genre of writing, it's actually incredibly important. It's like the concrete of construction. You literally find it in almost all forms of scholarly communication. Yes, the humble analytic paper that you have been asked to write in class, that's the same basic format you find in cutting-edge scholarly articles that communicate very difficult ideas. And so, as the title of the video series already alludes to, the coming episodes are all about better understanding this mode of written communication. And in this intro, I just want to give you an idea of what this video series will cover. And for that, let's start with the first question. What is an analytic paper? Well, rather than giving you a technical definition, I instead want to give you the intuition behind an analytic paper. So when you think of an analytic paper, this is the image I want you to have in mind. Here's your audience in place A, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your audience, the ones reading your paper, to get them from where they are to place B. This is where you want to take them. Now we're going to get more into what place B is, in terms of it being their thesis, their claim, but for now, it's sufficient for you to just think about it as your audience being in place A, and you want to get them to place B. Now the problem, as you can see here, is that your audience currently cannot cross, and so here is where you come in. You're going to use logic, evidence, and analysis, and you will use those elements as your raw material, and with it, you will build a bridge. And that bridge now allows your audience to move from where they are to where it is that you want them to go. And as they're moving, what you're doing is you are convincing them, you're persuading them by way of your logic, evidence, and analysis. That's what this movement is indicating. And so as they're moving, as they're being convinced by you, they will move from A to where it is that you want them to go to B. That's the point. And so when we think of an analytic paper, we really are talking about persuasion. That is the ultimate goal of an analytic paper. We are trying to get our audience from A to B. That's it. That's the point of an analytic paper. And when I say persuasion, I don't mean in this sly, dishonest way. I mean in the rigorous format where you're using, as I said, logic, evidence, and analysis. And so in that sense, when you're seeing an analytic paper and its three components, the intro, body, and conclusion, here's how you can think of it. And you may have heard this saying, and I'll just slightly alter it. The intro, you want to think of this. That's where you tell your audience what you are going to convince them of. And you're articulating the A and B. The body, that's where you actually convince the audience. That is, here's where you're building the bridge made out of logic, evidence, and analysis that helps your audience to move from where they are to where it is that you want them to move. And then lastly, in the conclusion, well, that's where you remind them of what it is you convince them of. That is, once they arrived at B, you help remind your audience of the journey that they just undertook. And that's really the three pieces of the analytic paper: the intro, body, and conclusion. And so what then does the video series cover? What is it that I'm hoping to accomplish here? So for that, let's come back to our bridge analogy. And here we're going to break it down into these three components: the thesis, the blueprint, and the end product. So when we're talking about the thesis, we are focusing in on the A and the B, where it is that our audience is and where it is that we want to take them. So the video series will cover this in part 1. We'll have several videos devoted to it, delve really deeply into it, but that is the first part. The second is the blueprint. So now, given that we have articulated A and B, here in the blueprint, we want to think very carefully and conceptualize, well, what does the bridge actually look like? What is it that we need to do in order to get our audience from where they are to the place that we want to take them? And then finally, we have the product. Here's where we actually build the bridge. And here you can also see very clearly that the final product links back to the thesis. We can clearly see how our audience can move from A to B. If you wouldn't have that, you would have a bridge to nowhere. And so you can see how the final product actually implements it. And you can also see how the final product represents the blueprint. That there's a very clear structure, very intentional in how this bridge has been built. And so you can see that the final product is virtually impossible if you don't have a thesis and did not carefully consider the blueprint. And so as such, the focus of this video series will be on these two, the thesis and the blueprint. Okay? And I will leave the product to you. That's the actual writing part. And so then the next question being, well, what's the goal of the video series? Given that we're going to go through the thesis and the blueprint, well, what's the goal here? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And let me start by saying what it is not. The video series here is not a recipe book. It does not offer a set of simple steps that you can mechanically follow with the guarantee of producing a great analytic paper. This is not what this video series is meant to be. Instead, the video series offers a conceptual framework, just like this bridge here, this analogy that we used. And the purpose is to equip you with the tools to better speak about, identify, and understand the nuances of writing a good analytic paper. We want to have the right tools to understand and break down what A and B is, what makes for a good bridge. And once you have those tools, then you can deploy them yourself and build the bridge that you need to build and articulate the A's and B's that are appropriate for the kind of argument that you're trying to make. That's the point of the video series here. Before I let you go, I just want to mention this last piece here, and that is the 5-paragraph essay, or sometimes also called the hamburger essay. And the idea being you have 5 paragraphs that you're going to use to write an analytic paper, and what you're going to do is sort of the top part right here, you're going to devote 1 paragraph to, that's the intro. Then we're going to have 3 paragraphs for the body of the analytic paper. And then lastly, we're going to have 1 paragraph for the conclusion. Now, if you're watching this right now and you don't know what I'm talking about, good. But for those of you who have learned how to write the paper in this format, what I'm asking you to do is to please forget about it for the remainder of this series. Put it aside. It may have been helpful up until now, but now I'm asking you, at the point that you're at, to just dismiss it. And there's a good reason why. Let me come back to the bridge analogy for this. So here again, we have an audience trying to go from A to B, and the 5-paragraph essay is telling you that whenever you're trying to get an audience from A to B, that bridge must look just like this. It must always have this particular structure, this idea of 5 paragraphs. But we all know that this is not true. Bridge can also look like this, or it can look like this. In fact, bridges can look in all kinds of different ways. And there's a good reason for it. Bridges are meant, or their shape is meant to be appropriate or solve the problem of the environment that they are being built in. Is it water? Is it windy? Is the gap really wide? What materials do you have available? All these kinds of questions will ultimately determine the kind of shape that the bridge takes. And yet, here you are, if you're sort of thinking just about the 5-paragraph essay, what you're telling yourself, what you're going to be stuck in, is thinking that, well, whenever I build a bridge, it has to look just like this, even when it is completely inappropriate to the environment that you're facing. And that is how this 5-paragraph essay becomes counterproductive. Yes, there are certain circumstances where it is useful, where it is appropriate, but there are tons of instances where it is not. In fact, I can tell you now that the more complicated your idea becomes, the more complex the idea becomes, the more counterproductive it becomes for you to just be stuck on this one particular way of thinking of building bridges. And so rather than thinking that it must look one particular way, what we want to do is think about the principles of bridge construction. And once you have those principles, well, then you can build the kind of bridge that is appropriate for the kind of environment that you are facing. And this is why I'm asking you to disregard, to dismiss, to let go of the 5-paragraph essay.